Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Legitimately big coaching job that opened up on, Sunday morning, as NC State fired Kevin Keatts and has now started its coaching search. Now, a couple very interesting things here. One, part of the reason this decision was made. Now, remember, all 18 teams don't go to the ACC tournament, and all 18 teams in the Big Ten do not go to the Big Ten tournament. So, first of all, I hate this. I think it's anti-college basketball. What do we say about college basketball? Every team has a shot in March. So I hate that team 16, 17, 18 aren't getting to go to the Big Ten tournament or the ACC tournament. But at the same time, the team was not bad. By the way, NC State lost to Miami on the final day of the regular season. And so they finished the season. This is the NC State Wolfpack. They finished the season tied. Well, they finished alone in 16th place, 12-19 overall. You lose to a Miami team that has been playing for an interim head coach for 3 months now. It's a bad way to end, and Kevin Keatts is officially out. Now, the other noteworthy thing, and I don't know North Carolina State fans know this, kind of wild that he gets fired a year after a Final Four run. It's easy to forget this now. Final Four last year, UConn beat Purdue. UConn played Alabama in the semis. Purdue played NC State in the semis. And I think it's easy to say, how can you fire a coach after a Final Four run? Well, that's a little bit disingenuous, because here's the truth. They played on Tuesday of the ACC tournament. In other words, when the ACC only had 15 teams, they finished either 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th in the ACC last year. They ended up winning 5 games in 5 days at the ACC tournament. And then after that, ended up winning 4 games in the NCAA tournament as an 11 seed. And so it was an incredible run, but there was never a moment that you were like, oh, like it wasn't like one of those things where like they had a lot of injuries, or they got hot at the right time. And it doesn't mean that they were a great team. Like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm not trying to diminish what they did, but there was never a moment that run, like the fan base felt like, okay, we've turned a corner. The truth with Kevin Keatts, and I like Kevin Keatts, I've had him on this show. It was year 8. They had made 2 NCAA tournaments before that. They had not won an NCAA tournament game I think they actually did win. I don't know. They hadn't made an they had made 2 NCAA tournaments, hadn't won an NCAA tournament game before that. And the other thing that was kind of worth noting about that run, I think there's a realistic chance that he would have gotten fired if they had lost on that Tuesday of the ACC tournament. They end up getting hot. He gets a 2-year extension, but when you follow up a bad season with another one, it's hard to feel bad. Now, like I said, real quick, 2 NCAA tournaments in the first 7 years. He did get some bad breaks. There was 1 year NC State was literally the first team out of the NCAA tournament. Team number 69. Nice. So that sucks. Then there was the 1 year, remember, I think it was the 2021 bubble year. They finished the season. They didn't have a player taller than 6'6". By the end of the year, they had like 6 guys with season-ending injuries. So you feel bad. He was given the benefit of the doubt, but don't feel too bad, because he got a 2-year extension for making the Final Four. He's going to get paid $7 million in buyout money, which is kind of a lot in this portal, NIL rev share era. It's just a lot of money to give to a coach. So Kevin Keatts is gone. And before we even get into candidates, what I would just say really quick, I think the one thing, if you read Kevin Keatts' statement, he said, listen, I think I left this program in better shape than I found it. And he said something that caught my attention. He said basically, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the statement in front of me, that basically with the right support, this team and this program can have a high level of success, okay? And so that stood out to me. And so I did some digging. I made some phone calls. I think Jeff Goodman even put out a tweet that NC State basically just did not give him NIL money in the portal last season. And you can blame anyone for anything. If you don't have the bullets in the portal to compete, there's only so much you can do, even in the ACC, even at a school like NC State, if you just don't have the resources to compete. So I think number one, they need to raise that NIL stuff. Now, I understand we're going toward a rev share era where the school will be paying out a lot of money, so it's not going to be as reliant on boosters. But you're NC State. You're a school that just made a Final Four, that's won multiple national championships throughout your time as college basketball. And so what I would say is, you have to improve the NIL, but I also think, and I truly believe this is a sleeping giant that in the NIL era, the one thing I'll say, NC State has a crazy fan base, but it's like any other fan base in the world, right? If you don't give them a reason to show up to the arena, they're just not going to. But this is a place they play in a pro arena. You play well, you're going to get 16, 17,000 every night, but you have to put a product on the court that is worth showing up for. And NC State in the regular season largely has not. To their credit, they made the Final Four last year. All right, now let's get to the stuff that all of you care about, which is who's going to be the next head coach. And so the second that job opened up, the second I actually, I was doing Fox Sports Radio late, so I woke up to the news that he had been let go. I'll be real. First name that I immediately thought of when I saw that the head coach, pretty straightforward. It was our friend, our buddy, friend of the Aaron Torres pod. We just had him on the show about 2 weeks ago. It was Will Wade. Okay. And so a couple things on Will Wade, and this is not anything that he said publicly, but I've been basically told behind the scenes, not by him, that last year was year one at McNeese State. He really wasn't looking to move. He basically felt like, look, I got left, high and dry by LSU, and we can argue whatever. But basically, he's like, I got left high and dry by LSU. McNeese gave me a shot. I'm not going to bounce after 1 year. They make the tournament last year, but I think this year he was going to be more willing to listen to opportunities. And there's been kind of a couple jobs that I've had earmarked for him. And not, I for the record, did not talk about jobs necessarily, individual jobs with him on the podcast, although we'll get to some comments from him in a minute. But then two, I will also say, I think that some of the jobs that have opened, I didn't think really were the right fit for him. Miami was the obvious one. They clearly targeted Jay Lucas early. He gets that job. He's actually already on campus. I saw that. Florida State, I don't know that Florida State's going to have the financial commitment that is needed. But it's interesting because 2 years in a row, we've had Will Wade on the podcast, and I've asked him. I've talked about other jobs, about other opportunities. Last year, he basically just said, look, in this world, there's no reason that every school in the power conferences shouldn't be able to compete. Raise some money, NIL, this and that, whatever. You can win right away, and we're seeing it this year. Pat Kelsey at Louisville, Mark Pope at Kentucky. John Calipari has turned things around in an offseason. Kevin Young at BYU. So it can be done. And so Will Wade was basically just like, it can be done. Now the question is, will it? And so it's funny because I actually, when we had him on the show, I asked him, I said, point blank, what are you looking for in your next head coaching job? We asked Will Wade. This is what he had to say. Is there anything specific, if you were to seriously consider leaving McNeese, that you need to look for?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've moved around a lot. I'd like to, when I leave here, if I leave here, I'd like to go somewhere where I can stay 10 or 12 years.
Sure.
You're
still a young guy. That's not that long.
I know, if I don't wear out my welcome.
10 or 12 years.
I mean, look, I've got it.
70s, man.
I've got it so good here with our school president and with our athletic director that, that makes a huge, huge difference. I've had it where, those guys are not as supportive of you. And I've had it where those guys are very supportive of you at various spots that I've been. And I've never had better or more support from both than I have here. And it makes a world of difference. We get a lot of the credit for turning it around. There's a whole team that turned this thing around. It's not just me. It's not just us, our staff. Like, there's a lot of people that went into making this thing work. And so, early on in my career, I probably thought I could just do all that myself and I'd just be a force of nature and we'd figure it out and, whatever it may be. I now have a much clearer understanding of everything that it takes to really, really win at the highest level that you need to win at. And so that's something that I evaluate because, reality is at McNeese, we're better than a lot of power conference teams right now. You go look at KenPom, we're ahead of at least a dozen of them right now, more than that.
So that was Will Wade. By the way, that was also Torres with a haircut, but that's another conversation for another day. Will Wade talking about what he's looking for in a next job. And I think, first of all, it's interesting. He has built McNeese into a little bit of a destination. What he also said was, listen, this is a league that historically has been not only like obviously a one-bid league, but also that the Southland is historically a league that you win that league, you're playing in Dayton in the 16, on 16 game. And so in other words, there's a ceiling at that job. I think he's willing to listen. I mentioned that I had a couple jobs earmarked for him that kind of made sense. I think this is the one for NC State, okay? Because for NC State, listen, the fan base is there. I believe the finances are there, but you have to get that in line. But he is a guy that I believe could step in on day one and have immediate success. One, the ACC ain't very good, okay? We know how bad it is. It's really trending towards potentially 3 bids in this NCAA tournament. But you have the history, you have the fan support. We believe financially you'll be okay. And 2, sometimes I just look at it and I just sit there and say, like, who is the guy that nobody else wants to get the job? And you can say whatever you want about Will Wade, how it ended at LSU, whatever. Guy won the SEC regular season title at LSU, okay? And it wasn't that long ago. Also made multiple NCAA tournaments at LSU. And that's the guy that I believe, if you're UNC, if you're Duke, you want nothing to do with Will Wade at that job, because he's at the very least, he's going to make your life hell. It's going to be competitive. You're playing that team twice. That's just not something that you want to have to deal with twice a year in your own state, all of that. So Will Wade, to me, would be the no doubt about it number one call. The other name that seems to be linked a lot to the NC State job, Ryan Odom. He's been everywhere. He was the coach at UMBC, remember, when at UMBC when they beat Virginia in 2019, stays at UMBC, ends up going to Utah State last year, or 3 years ago, makes the NCAA tournament. Now he's at VCU. VCU's very good, but they're kind of one of those teams that might not make the tournament if they don't win their conference tournament. They're like 26-5 overall, but they don't have any real great wins on the resume. So I just bring it up because he's a logical next guy. He's won at multiple stops. I think that he would be good. Also, for people who are history buffs, his dad, Dave Odom, was, of course, the head coach at Wake Forest when they had Tim Duncan, all that. So he's very familiar with that area. He's in Virginia already. By the way, one other thing about Will Wade, he was at VCU before as well. So, has coached in that ACC kind of footprint at Virginia, as well as, the SEC footprint as well. So Ryan Odom's probably the other one that makes the most sense. Now, Ryan Odom, I think, is probably the favorite to get the Virginia job. Virginia, of course, Tony Bennett resigned before the season. They're looking for a new head coach. So we'll see if he has the pick of the two, if he's the favorite of the two, whatever. Beyond those two, I think it gets pretty slim pretty quick. One thing I will say, if somehow, and I think it's trending towards Indiana not really pursuing Chris Beard, I think you give Chris Beard a phone call. If you're Chris Beard, would you rather coach in the ACC with the way the ACC is, or would you rather coach in the SEC with the way the SEC is? I'd at least give Chris Beard a call. I'd give like the Chris Jans types a call. Mississippi State's a tough place to win in the SEC. A couple other names, Tony Skinn, who of course is at George Mason right now. George Mason is awesome, along with VCU, the best team in the best team in the A10. And so, I think the job opened up. I'll be real. I'm not, listen, I'm not pining for Will Wade. I don't care where he goes. If he stays at McNeese, that's fine with me. I'll still go visit him at McNeese because I love those casinos down there in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Okay. But I'm just saying, he just feels like the guy that makes the most sense. Now, it's on NC State. You have to step up NIL. You have to be ready to compete. But I think it's kind of interesting because 2 things. One, the ACC is so down. I think the ACC is getting a huge infusion of coaching talent. Like, we spend so much time, oh my goodness, this guy retired, Coach K retired, Roy Williams retired, Tony Bennett retired, Leonard, and it's like, at some point, it's like, yeah, those guys were old and they didn't want to adjust to the new world. So you have Pat Kelsey killing at Louisville in year 1. Jay Lucas, I think, is going to be very good in year 1 at Miami. And I think he's going to be good big picture. You add Will Wade to the mix at NC State, that all of a sudden becomes a very interesting league. And I think there's a lot of schools that all of a sudden have a lot of upside. I don't think you're looking at 3 bids in the NCAA tournament going forward. By the way, since I criticize North Carolina all the time, I think getting their kind of behind the scenes stuff in order with the GM position, I think will do them well. But if you're LSU or if you're NC State, just go get LSU. Give him whatever he wants in NIL. Give him whatever he wants in salary structure. That dude will win, and he'll win quickly.